Yes, yes, yes. Hi there. Good evening, and you're welcome to the Mindset Show with Tony Williams. Um, I'm trusting you all had a great weekend, and as always, you're all geared up and ready to go this Monday evening. So, a very good evening to you guys out there. Um, I'm quite and always delighted to have you on board with me. Uh, as you always know, Monday night, 9 o'clock, you're tuned to the Mindset Show with Tony Williams. And the Mindset Show is a show where we try and teach other how we become best or better versions of ourselves, better versions of our old self, I should say. I'm your host, Tony Williams. I'll be anchoring the show for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Kind of did start a little bit late today. So yeah, as you know, this show comes to you from Star Radio UK. It's one of UK's finest independent internet radio stations. As I always and will never fail to say, the show is an interactive show, so the studio lines are always open. You could contact us on 0208 133 2257. That's 0208 133 2257. Or you could contact us on 0208 133 2258. 0208 133 2258. So that's 2257 or 2258 for calls straight into the studio where you could share your thoughts and your ideas with me on tonight's topic or anything else you want to talk about that's relevant to what we're discussing tonight. On the other hand, we're, as the name goes, it's an internet radio station, so that means we're extremely social. Find us across all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and our handle is Star Radio UK. And right there on, you know, we could pick up your comments, pick up your messages, share your tips and tricks on what we have in discussion for you tonight. So this is the Mindset Show with Tony Williams, and you're welcome once again to the program. Let's dive right into it. Topic tonight is simply habits. It's hard for every single one of us, including myself, to say we don't have a habit. Whether it's a good habit, whether it's a bad habit, either way, we all have a habit within us that's either propelling us or that's restricting us. So hopefully tonight we're going to discuss how to build habits, how to break bad habits. But before we go in there, let me just start by asking you a little question, like how focused are you today? Or how focused are you? Or how focused do you think you're going to be for the next sort of 45 minutes, if I'm correct, an hour, where this show will be coming to you? Maybe you want to score yourself between 1 and 10, 1 being the lowest of the focus or the attention that you're going to give the show tonight, 10 being the highest of the attention you're going to give the show tonight. Score yourself. Maybe you're busy, maybe you're relaxing home from work, you're eating and you've just stumbled across the radio station and you think to yourself today, well, I'm going to listen to Tony and hear what he has to say. Maybe it might resonate. Maybe I could pick a point or two, or maybe he's just talking gibberish, as they normally say. But score yourself and how focused you're going to be tonight. It's important you do that, because whatever number you score yourself tonight, where I'm going is that it's important that you prepare the environment around you to correspond with that number. So if you score yourself hopefully to the higher level around 10, I'm hoping you take away all forms of distraction and you're focused, so that, you know, you could squeeze at least a nugget or two from the information that I try and provide tonight, or perchance information that anybody else who calls in or who messages us on social media decides to share with us tonight. So all this, it's coming to you once again, Star Radio UK. And tonight you're on the Mindset Show once again with Tony Williams, where we are going to be discussing habits. Call them good habits, call them bad habits. I simply call them habits. Hopefully the habits that most of us harbor or harness are good habits and habits that propel us forward. But in the same vein, it's a two-sided coin. You know, on the other side of that coin, there are habits that restrict us, prevent us, limit us, and keep us stuck in sort of miry clay over a long period of time. So we're going to try and get ourselves out of it tonight with these small ideas. So I always like to ask a question, because the truth of the matter is, even research shows that when you ask yourself a question, or when you ask questions, or when you're put in front of a question, your mind automatically seeks for answers. And that's why we get tested. That's why we are, you know, or students, you know, would study for so long a period of time, and before they're certified or before they're accredited for a professional course or so, you would have to sit down and answer questions, like in form of an exam, or in form of a interview, in the form of a presentation. You know, you just answer questions because they want to see how your mind has, you know, they call it the frontal cortex, frontal lapel, I think it is. Yeah, frontal lapel, or the frontal cortex. It searches for answers when you ask for questions. So it would, you know, they say when someone's asked a question and he doesn't know the answer, his eyes automatically rolls either to the left or to the right side of his brain. That's because he's, you know, that part of the brain is searching for answers, like an antenna that searches for answers. So I always like to start the show by asking maybe a couple of questions or two. And today, some of the questions that I have that pertain to habits are: what is the most singular important thing that you as an individual will say prevents you from A, keeping resolutions? The year's coming to an end now, you know, in the next 3.5 months or so, we're going to start a new year, hopefully, by God's grace. And most of us would start new resolutions. You know, most of us would say, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to start doing this. But the truth of the matter is, after a couple of weeks, I should say, maybe after 2 weeks, after 3 weeks, a lot of people would have given up on those resolutions. Those resolutions would have been like they never even got started in the first place. So what's the most singular important thing that prevents you from keeping resolutions or plans, changing behavioral patterns? Behavior patterns are quite important as well, because as we behave is how, as we present ourselves through our behavior, is how people see and sort of judge us or perceive us, or it creates the kind of perception that other people have of us. And if you're that kind of person who, you know, you pay so much attention to what, you know, how people perceive you, or what perception people have of you, then it's quite important to know how you put yourself across to these people, so that, you know, they are gaining or getting the right perception of you, you know. Or what are the bad habits that we have that keep us bound, or keep us addicted, you know, or keep us doing the same thing, keep us in that vicious circle where, you know, it just seems like we can't get out. You know, I think somewhere in the scripture Paul said, if I paraphrase that, even though I try, you know, my mind, or my mind knows the right things that I ought to do, I just struggle to do those right things, you know, because it's become, everything that he's talking about has become unconsciously, oh, that's some cost, unconsciously sort of implanted, embedded in them, if I use a computer term, embedded in them. And he just does these English, he just does these things without even thinking about them at all, you know. So what are these things that you think, you know, prevent you, the most singular thing that prevents you from, you know, keeping resolution and plans, changing your behavior patterns? It keeps you bound, it keeps you addicted, it makes you unproductive, you know, it keeps you in the same circle, you know. What are they? Let us know. Feel free to call in on Star Radio UK, 0208 133 2257, 0208 133 2258, and let us know what you think are your personal things you struggle with, personal habits you struggle with, that prevent you from breaking free of these habits, so to say. Well, whilst you struggle in that, my perception is, and I think it would be fair to say, that the only thing that probably is a fundamental thing that stops us from all these things that I've mentioned or asked as in the form of a question above, are the habits that we reenact, those habits that we unconsciously do, or those habits that we've sort of consented to, you know, those habits that we've agreed and given up upon, that these are just the way these things ought to operate for us. And it's funny that is what I said, because I always like to look for definitions of major words that or words that I think are the objective words in my title or in the show that I'm doing. And when I looked at habit, it said as easily that it's something that, and I'll paraphrase again, it's something that someone's just given up on, you know, something that they've just given up on, they've just decided, you know, this is how it's going to be, and they're often very, very difficult to break. So that's literally a paraphrase of what the dictionary says is a habit, or something that I've just accepted. It did use the word accepted, or something that I've allowed to, or I've conceded to, and just believe that that's how it's going to be, or that's how it is. It actually is. And it goes on to say on the second line of that definition that those things are normally very hard to break, and that would give you an overview of what the dictionary definition or paraphrase of a habit is. But the truth is, you know, me and you know that whatever it is that we want to do in life, you know, be it more productive, be it, you know, have a better relationship, achieve better goals in life, you know, get better jobs, change, you know, our behavioral patterns, you know, if we don't look at the habits that either help us get there or the habits that prevent us from getting there, we're not gonna, you know, sort of make no impact, or we're not going to make there's not going to be no change. We're just going to be like someone going around in the same circle, you know, just struggling and striving to break free from something, but find ourselves still doing that same thing unconsciously that we're trying to break free from, you know. So how do we let go of habits then? Or how do we let go of things that how do we break free from things that hold us back? How do we sort of build habits that propel us forward? You know, I personally figure out that I personally think that before we could figure out how we're going to change, which is ultimately what habits prevent us from doing, we need as individuals to figure out what we want to change. Because if we can't figure, if we're trying to figure out how we want to change, and we don't really look at what we want to change, then again, we might be changing stuff, but we are not changing the core things that we think are restricting us, or the core things that we think are preventing us, or that are overwhelming us, or or the major thing that impacts that thing that is making us uncomfortable. We're not dealing with that main issue. We're just, so to say, perambulating around the bush and not addressing the main issue. So in doing that, we've got to be honest with ourselves. We've got to look at the situation, or as they say, take the bull by the horn and say, look, this thing is what I want to change. This habit is what I want to break. And whatever it takes, whatever I have to put in place, however I have to articulate it and put it at the forefront of my mind, characters I have to change, people I have to drop, behaviors I have to sort of get away from. I've got to do these things, because unless I do these things, I am not going to be able to make a change to these situations. So, as we know, it's always difficult, but it's something that we just have to do. And many might say, well, why is it difficult? The truth of the matter is, as individuals, and I've mentioned this on this program a number of times, is we sort of run in a unconscious mode 95% of the time. So that's like we're just running on autopilot, so people tend to ask, oh, I don't understand what running in an unconscious mode is. Now, I say multitasking is bad, because multitasking is trying to do two things the wrong way. But you see, when you're running in an unconscious mode, it's the only time you could multitask. Because when you're running in an unconscious mode, you could think and do other things, because the first thing that you're doing, or either of the things that you're doing, is so embedded inside of you, you don't even have to think about it. So it's unconscious. You just do it. So like an example would be, you wake up in the morning and you have your bath. You don't have to think about having your bath when you're bathing. You got to wash your head, and wash your face, and wash your neck, wash your butt, wash your armpits, wash your and then you don't have to think about it. You just go ahead and do it. And whilst you're having that bath and doing all of that stuff, you still could be thinking about, oh, how's my day going to turn out to be? I've got a meeting at 9 o'clock. This is what I've got to wear. You don't have to pay any particular attention to it, because it's been embedded in you, and subconsciously you just reenact those things the minute you step yourself into those environments. And that's what it is. That's why when you now sort of developed a habit that you've now allowed to embed itself or imprint itself on the unconscious or subconscious part of your mind, you start reenacting those habits without even thinking about it. And the body ultimately starts to craving for those things, or starts to demand for those things, without even you having any form of control, conscious control over it. So I'm hoping that makes sense to you. We're talking about habits, how to build them, how to break them. We are on Star Radio UK, coming to you from the heart of London. I'm Tony Williams, your host, and this is the Mindset Show. So, if we put all that into perspective, then it starts to make sense why breaking habits becomes so difficult. Why someone will say, oh, but I've tried the 21 days, or it takes 21 days to break a habit. You have to, repeat or go work at it for 21 days. And my brother, my sister, I think that for me, I mean, it might work for other people, but I think, and I like to go by research and sort of, neuroscience or behavior economic. It just doesn't work because, look, the truth is, if it does work, you have all these challenges on social media, hundreds, 30-day press up, I don't know, 30-day this, 30-day that, the 30-day challenge. If that is the case, let's take the 30-day 100 press up a day challenge, for instance, or 100 press up a day challenge for 30 days. How come, if people would push themselves through that daily pain of completing the challenge for 100 press ups every single day, but straight after that 30-day period, they just wean off? How come it doesn't get imprinted in their mind? This is what I'm saying, that the fact that someone, a book or something online, or somebody will say to you, you need a certain amount of days to do it. For me, it's just gibberish. It doesn't work. It might work for some people, but I think if you want something that's sustainable, and you want something that would work, and you want something that you could follow it, then you have to put a certain amount of commitment to this thing. And this commitment doesn't have a time limit. It's a commitment that you would have to continually do until you're able to consciously break that habit, and then know that that thing that you're struggling with has become something that you've overcome totally and replaced with something different. So how could we change a habit? How do we change a habit? I used to say, and I've probably said this a few times, I've had some bad habits in my younger days where I call it a habit. I smoked and I drank, but as much as I don't think I was addicted to it, I still knew that I did it excessively. And so when I say I knew I did it excessively, I mean, I wouldn't need to personally have someone say to me, oh, you're addicted to this thing, or this thing gets the best of you, or anything. But I knew that even if I should go just by the amount of money that I spent a day on maybe smoking, which was about within the range of, at any given day, 20 to 40 pounds to buy, the whatever sort of it wasn't no drugs, but it was, it was herbs that we were smoking then. It was still excessive, because if I put that into perspective now, that's 20 to 40 pounds, an average, maybe about 140 or 150 pounds, an average, because sometimes it might be 20 pounds, sometimes it might be 40 pounds. So on average, if I average it, we're talking about 120 to 140 per day, per week. And that was excessive. And that's not to do with maybe when you want to go out on the weekend and then you drink some alcohol. So for me, it was a habit, and it was a bad habit, and it was an expensive habit. But then it got to a stage where I started to think to myself, look, I've got to break this habit, because it's obviously, one, for health reasons. I've got to make sure that, I don't go and sort of damage all my organs. You only have one, unless you want to go and get them replaced somewhere. And, obviously your mental state of mind, how you come across to people, behavioral patterns, and all the bad things that smoking and drinking does to you. I don't need to sort of start listing them here. But I figured it's time for all of this to stop. So when I figured it was time for all of this to stop, I made a conscious decision that I would change. But more than anything, it was, so these things I'm talking about was about 21 years ago or so, which was when I had my first son. Well, my only son. There's no first son. And I started to think, I cannot be in the house with a newborn baby and be puffing away or drinking alcohol. So not only the fact that I decided that I've got to break that habit, I tied that habit to something which is more important than my selfish self. So I tied it to another individual who will benefit from me giving myself that ability to break that habit, which I think is very important, and I would come to later. So, and unknown to me, it wasn't until I started reading and doing a bit of more research into habits and stuff over the years, because it all ties up with mindsets and which I'm extremely passionate about, as you know. It wasn't until then that I started learning that even neuroscience and behavioral economics and, you know, all these, you know, mindset leaders and thought leaders had always said that to break a habit, you've got to tie it. Not only do you have to get a different habit to replace it, but you've got to tie that specific habit to something different or something else as an alternative. Otherwise, you keep realizing that you fall short or you fall straight back onto what you're trying to break. And in order to do that, there are 5 major components that they say is so important that you tie those habits to in order to break it or to overcome it. And part of those 5 major components, number 1 is you have to have a reason, a definite reason why you want to break that habit. If you don't have a reason why you want to break that habit, my friend, forget it. You're not gonna be able to even think about breaking it. Number 2, you've got to know what triggers the old habit. So you have to have a reason why you have to want to break that old habit. Then you have to know what triggers that habit. What makes you just pick up a pack of cigarette and smoke? Is it boredom? Is it stress? Is it social circles? Is it just a mind thing? You've got to be able to know what triggers it, and you've got to be able to identify it, because if you don't know what triggers it, if you can't identify what, you know, is the major cause of why you do what you do, which is bad for you, then you're never going to be able to break it, because before you even think of breaking it, you're doing it all over again. You know, you've got, number 3 would be, you've got to be able to replace that, which I said earlier, with micro habits. And I would explain that as well. You've got to be able to have number 4, which is you've got to be able to have effective practices. I call this like deep practicing schemes of how you want to, let me use the easy word, massage the new habit into your not your how you want to massage into your plans, into your lifestyle. It has to be able to be massaged in. You can't just fling it and think, yeah, I've made up my mind, it's going to happen. And I'll try and tie all this to my own personal sort of experience with breaking that habit of drinking and smoking. And then number 5, you've got to have a plan. You've got to definitely have a plan on how you want to break all these habits, and how, you know, you're going to get back on track if you fall short. So this is Star Radio, the Mindset Show. It's your host, Tony Williams. I hope, and we're talking about habits tonight, I hope this has made some sense to you so far. But I could guarantee you, if you sort of just pay attention and pick some few nuggets or steps from what I'm putting out there tonight, you be in the position over a period of time to sort of break any habit or build new habit that would just empower you and create a better version of who we are. So let's visit these 5 things, or these 5 components that I said you have to have as someone who's intending, as someone who's intending on breaking these breaking habits, or or habitual patterns, I should say. 1, we spoke about reason. You have to have a clear reason. I mentioned this before. There has to be a clear reason why you want to break this habit. And I said I'm going to try and tie it to my own personal experience. So my experience was that I was having, my reason was that I was having a newborn baby, my son, about 21 years ago, and I figured, I can't have this. This was my first son and my only son so far. And I figured, I cherished him, and I still cherish him up to now. But I figured I can't. This is a newborn baby. As much as I love to do this, this is my personal space. This is my house. This is my home. I still couldn't see myself, just harming the child by passive smoke. So to say, and not only me, maybe my friends would come up and come home and they want to sort of light up their own thing, and yeah, it might have been Monday night football or Saturday night match of the day, and we were just chilling, the things that we did comfortably and nicely before. I thought, okay, there's a new baby. Even if, so to say, I figured, oh, I've got to put the child in the next room, and then I'll do it in the front room and close the door. Eventually you're going to open the door, it's smoke, and I just figured I can't see myself putting my son through that. So I tied that to a reason that was more than me, and I figured, how long am I always going to go outside and then smoke, and at that time I think it still is, I don't know, but smoking herbs was illegal, so I figured you're standing outside your door, you're smoking, one police will just walk past and pick you up. So I just didn't have all time for that. So I thought to myself, you know what, I've got to break this habit. And I decided that, this is one of the reasons, away from all my own personal reasons why I wanted to break it. I thought this was a reason that was away from myself, that was good enough, sufficient enough, or justifiable enough for me to be able to decide that, okay, this thing, we've got to draw a line. And it wouldn't happen overnight, but you have to have something that you draw, you decide that this is why you want to draw the line, whether it's because of, the position you're currently in, financially, emotionally, if you're in an abusive relationship, you have to think like, look, if I'm in an abusive relationship and something happens, even though, my mind says, oh, I need to stay here, if something happens, who are all my loved ones who's going to suffer? When you want to break something, you've got to be able to tie it to something that's away from yourself, and it would help on the long run on how to propel you forward, or give you ideas on how to propel you forward, or give you something to be accountable for most of the time when you think you reach that crossroad where you could just slide back. You always know that, well, I've still, these people, I've got to talk to them about this, or these people, they're relying on me for this, so I just can't let this thing take the better of me. So that's having a reason to break the habit. Then secondly, the way I put it is, you've got to be able to know, and I mentioned that before, what your trigger is. What is the thing that triggers this habit? A few things do trigger habit. Location, so I said it could be social circle, it could be like you're on holiday, and so in my case, or it could be people who are promiscuous could get into a club and just say, you know, before they get to the club, they're fine. The minute they get into the club, everything that walks in a skirt in front of them has just become praise for the hunter. You know, so certain people, the location determines, you know, are things that trigger these things. Some people it could be time. Some people it could be other people around them. Some people like their association they keep. Generally by themselves, they're nice people, but the minute they mix up with this person or with that person, their whole thinking pattern just changed, and they feel the needs to belong. They feel the need to just do things anyhow. They, you know, they sort of come out of their own conscious self, and they just sort of allow themselves to be sort of swayed by any pattern of the association of people who were around them, and that also ties in with having a strong mindset and having self-discipline and being able to control yourself. But ultimately, when you don't have none of these, it just leads to an habitual pattern, or more than anything, that habitual pattern leads to a behavior pattern, and then ultimately leads to all the bad things that come with it, assuming that habit that we're talking about is a bad habit. So you've got to be able to know what triggers the habit. You've got to be able to identify it. You've got to be specific, you know, because if you're not specific about it, if you can't identify it, you know, you're not going to be able to break it. Because as I said earlier on, even before you think about it, or even when you think of breaking it, you find yourself already doing it. So you've got to know what triggers it. You've got to be able to figure this triggers this. This is what. And then for me, in my case, if I tie it, it was the fact that, you know, I had friends that smoked around me all the time. And, you know, then it became a routine. So I just figured in the morning I have to smoke. When I come back from work, I have to smoke. You know, in the afternoon when I'm driving, I've got to smoke. It was just habitual. So you've got to be able to figure it all out. And then when you figure it all out, identify it, lay it down, you have to be able to articulate it. And then so you know everything, you know, every target that you want to attack, so that you're not finding yourself falling short or leaving one that could just slip through the back door and come back at you and make you continue doing those things that you tend not to do. And then number 3, you've got to create a micro habit. So what does that mean? That means when you have a habit that you're trying to break, you have to replace it with a different habit, but you cannot then turn around and just say, okay, so someone who's smoking, and then just say, I'm just going to stop smoking altogether. Yes, some people could do that. That would tie in with a lot of willpower as well. But one of the major reasons why people fall short of most of the resolutions or go back to, you know, the old habits they do is because when you stop something all of a sudden without replacing it with something, then you have what they call withdrawal syndromes. That's why if you're on, you know, hard drugs or something, you know, when they want to wean you off it, they would give you some form of, I don't know, whatever they give you to sort of substitute, you know, all the cravings that your body needs or that your body has been used to over a period of time. But in this case, you know, and they give it to you bit by bit, because if they give it to you all of a sudden, it has the same effect as doing, you know, as the initial thing that you're trying to break. So there really isn't going to be no different. And that's basically what this means. You know, you've got to create micro habits. So you've got to, after you've been able to identify it, so, you know, those micro habits will just address one issue at a time, one specific thing at a time. It's not going to be something that all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself, you know, slapped in the face, you know, with this major thing that you want to use as a substitution for your habit, and then you find yourself struggling to do it, and then eventually you just become overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed, because you find out that nothing is changing. It just seems like you're on an uphill task, and, you know, at the end of the day you just find out, well, I might as well, it's better I was better off the way I was. I might as well just accept and concede that the way I was best for me. Change is impossible. But that's a lie. Change is always possible, you know. So, yeah, you've got to create a micro habit. You've got to have effective practices. And that's what I meant by when I said earlier on, these things don't come overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. You've got to practice, you know, in bits. And I'll always say, you know, when they say practicing bits, you know, effective practices or practicing in bits, people could still think, oh, it's all about just practicing the main thing as the main substitution or the main idea or the main habit that you want to use as a substitution for your old habit as a whole. No, you have a overview of what your substitution habit is, but that whole overview has to be broken into manageable steps. So let's assume someone who plays tennis or who wants to learn to play tennis. You know, you can't be a fresher or, you know, on the tennis court, the lawn tennis court, and just go there, catch the ball, and whack it straight into the opponent's net, opponent's side of the court. I could guarantee, if you're one of those people, the amount of times you try that, it would just be all over the place. You would never hit, you know, at that stage, hit, you know, that, I don't know what it's called, but hit that right place where the ball has to land into in your opponent's court, because it's such a difficult task to do, but yet it's not an impossible task to do. It's quite easier to just, you know, as a fresher on the tennis court, pick the ball and probably just learn how to throw the ball first. Even before you learn the arm swing, just learn how to throw the ball, and then learn the right steps you need to take corresponding to, you know, how you throw the ball, and then learn the swing, and then learn the positioning of the body, and over a period of time, if you do it repetitively, you learn to throw the ball up enough, then over a period of time your arm would learn to align itself with the flight of the ball to be able to swing the bracket, you know, to hit the ball at the right time and right momentum. And over that period of time, you will find out that you begin to hit the ball, you know, more fluently, more appropriately, and then soon you start landing the ball in your opponent's half of the court in the right place, and obviously scoring points, you know. So yeah, that effective practice, I put it down as you've got to sort of practice in small bits. You've got to do it repetitive. Ah, God, you've got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. I have a twist tongue, so I find myself, you know, sometimes struggling to pronounce certain words repetitively. Repetitively. And then, most importantly, you have to be mindful of when you're doing it wrong. So it's not just that you're throwing that tennis ball up and you're swinging the racket and you're just throwing it up. No, you've got to be mindful of it, because it's only when you're mindful of it that you would know, you know, that, oh, okay, if the ball moves too far out, I'm not, you know, going to be able to hit it correctly. If it's too far in, I'm not going to be able to hit it correctly. So, you know, you've got to be mindful of it. You've got to pay attention to it. And that's just like building any other new habit. You've got to be mindful of what you want to break. You've got to be mindful of what the substitute habit is. You've got to be mindful of what the little steps you're taking. You've got to be mindful of when you're on the crossroad of falling back, you know, onto your old self or your old pattern, or, you know, and you've got to be mindful of the things that trigger it. More than anything, you've got to plan, which is number 5 of what I call components of breaking or building new habits. You've got to plan and plan ahead. And plan ahead doesn't mean plan, map out a navigational map or anything. Plan ahead, as far as I'm concerned, is just it's literally just what do you call it? Planning ahead is just a way to redeem yourself when you fall short, because yes, you are going to slip up. Yeah, I mean, a number of times I decided to break, you know, when I decided to break my smoking habit, yes, I slipped up. And just in case you don't know, I haven't been smoking for the best part of 20 years, so this is not something new. But yes, I did slip up, and so it was between that first and the first year. So I was talking about 21 years ago. I had myself. So between that first year, when it was newborn and one, that the slip, you know, when I say I did slip up, it's not like yesterday I went to go have a, or 2 days ago. No. So at that point in time, you will slip up, and when you do slip up, you know, you have to have a way, a map that would lead you back on track. Because if you don't have a map or a plan on how you're going to lead yourself back on track when you do slip up, sorry to say, you will slip up, and you would not only slip up, you will slip up and you will fall completely on that slip and be unable to get up completely at all. So what we've been discussing tonight, those technically are the 5 components of, you know, where neuroscience and behavioral economists outlines that every individual who's struggling to, or who's trying to break a habit, has to be able to adopt. If you can't adopt them, then, and they're not even sort of what's the word, interchangeable or substitute. You can't substitute one for the other. You've got to be able to adopt those 5 sort of components in order to successfully break those habits. So in summary, you know, of how to build a new habit, I literally said we've got to identify the trigger, what triggers the habit, what triggers the whole habit. We've got to be able to identify it, know the crossroads that, you know, we know that crossroad, that when we're on that crossroad, or the place that we're in, or the things that we do, that, or, you know, the people that we're with, that, you know, just, what do they say, not in sight, it wouldn't be in sight, but it literally is trigger, that triggers us to act in a certain way, or want a certain thing, or behave in a certain way, or prevent us from doing this, or think in a certain way. You know, these are we're talking about things you want to change, you know, that you call habits. So you've got to know what triggers it. You've got to be able to know when you're at that crossroad, because that's why it was important that you articulate it and you know, specified exactly what those habits were. And yeah, as I said, if you don't know what triggers it, you're never going to know how to break it, because if you can't even identify it, how on earth are you going to be able to break it? And you've got to be specific as possible. You know, and I did mention that location, time, emotional state, people, you know, responses, not being able to put your emotions under control. All these things are triggers that we have to pay attention to. Spell out the habit, you know, be able to spell it out, articulate it, you know, be specific, you know, don't undermine it. Don't take anything for granted. Whatever it is, just say it. Even if it's not what you think is a habit, but it comes to the forefront of your mind when you're sort of trying to answer this question, pen it down, because at a later time, if you think it's not something that you're struggling with, you could actually cross it out and say, okay, well, this one doesn't fall, you know, part of what I'm struggling with, you know, I'm totally in control of this. Then yeah, you could cross it out. But if it comes to the forefront of your mind, pen it down, and you could do the process of elimination later. You know, define a new habit. That's quite important. Define a new habit. I've said to you, you know, in the course of the program, that you've got to replace your old habit with a new habit. With a new habit, not the whole sum of the new habit at one go, but manageable steps of that new habit that you think could replace each and every habit that you've tried to identify in the smaller sort of perspective. And what they say, or what is easier to do, is be able to name that habit, whatever you want as a micro habit to replace, you know, a component of your major habit that you're struggling with. It has to be something that you could define in 60 seconds. Because if you can't make a decision on it in 60 seconds, forget it. You're going to stand there over processing it. You're going to be over imagining it. You're going to be thinking, this thing, and before you know it, boom, you know, your subconscious mind would have taken over and it would have thrown you off course. So you've got to be able to define. In my case, and I've said this on this program before, when I would now go back and sort of buy maybe a bag of herbs or 2 bags or something, I might decide to roll up in the car and then I'll buy £20 thing. These are part of my slip ups. So I'll buy maybe £20 thing bag or so. Back in the days, don't know what they sell for now, and I roll the zoo, and then I would drive off, and I'll say to myself, oh, I thought I said I'm not smoking them, and I would, maybe after I've smoked some of the zoo and I've enjoyed it, I'll just throw it out of the window, and I'll throw the bag out of the window straight away as well. And I think to myself, so I probably might have driven 100 meters up the road or 2, you know, and I think, that's £20 I've just thrown out. And then I'll go back and I'll go pick up the bag. And then, you know, after I did that for a while, at least, you know, I knew what triggered it. I tied it to a reason. I started making decisions that, you know, actionable decisions in 60 seconds. And then when I realized ultimately over a period of time that I always go back and pick up that bag, then when I decided to be throwing it out, I don't just throw the bag out. I actually open it up and I just empty it out and drive off. And then after a period of time, I thought, I can't be wasting money like this. I'm not going to be going there. So there has to be a decision that you tie it to, you know, that you could make up your mind on in 60 seconds. So start small, be intentional. Again, I was very intentional on what I wanted to do. If need be, get a support system around you. A support system could be people like mentors, like coaches, some people you're accountable to. I mentioned that. Join a mastermind group, you know. One of the nicest things, if you think you're going to struggle with everything, just get a habit app. There are apps all over the place, habit apps that just, you know, whatever you want to put in there, whatever you want to do, put in there, and it just constantly reminds you. I'm not talking about Google Calendar. I'm talking these are built specifically for habits. And more than anything, you've got to remember our brain is smart by default. By default, our brain is smart. And for us to actually be smarter than our brain, or for us to outsmart our brain, we've just got to try and be smarter than our brain. You know, it was Winston Churchill that once said that, you know, we shape our buildings, and after a while, our buildings begin to shape us. We shape our habits. After a while, our habits begin to shape us. You've been listening to The Mindset Show with Tony Williams. I hope you had a fantastic time tonight. I certainly did. I got my points across. And till we speak again next week, I hope you all have a fantastic week ahead. Good night and God bless.